session of Parliament continues to remain a pipe dream. Joining us now on the phone line is the man who's been entrusted with the task of drawing up a consensus between states and the centre, the chairman of the State Finance Minister's GST panel, Dr. Amit Mitra, also the Finance Minister of West Bengal. Dr. Mitra, appreciate you joining us here. A very crucial meeting that took place in the capital today, sir. Let me start by asking you if there has been any assurance that's been given by the centre on the unanimous demand of state governments that there be no dual control on turnover less than 1.5 crores, sir.
Well, I think the Honourable Union Finance Minister derived clarity because he saw across finance ministers of states, across political parties from which they're elected, unanimously, resoundingly telling him that 1.5 crores is not negotiable because if the GST does not serve the interest of the small businesses of this country, what is the point of this reform? For example, 1.5 crores a year means a very small amount per month turnover. So a woman who runs a beauty parlor, let us say. Now, if she has to face not only the state's tax structure, which she is doing today, but in addition, you have a center going in there with officers there, and then beginning to do audits, raids, it would be impossible for the small person to function. So that I must confess that finance ministers across the states, across political parties from which they're elected, told the Union Finance Minister straight and clear that this is something that single control, yes, dual control is okay, about 1.5 crores, for which a structure is created which is smooth, which is also non-inspector Raj process where there will be easy process of assessment of taxes, for which, by the way, already a model has been produced by a committee, and therefore it made
Dr.
very
Mitra, has the centre given you any assurance that they will accept the demand that's been made by the state empowered panel?
Well, I believe that he understood the weight of this whole process, the political consensus along with finance minister's consensus, and I believe that his revenue secretary, his additional secretary finance, and the whole team was there. I genuinely believe that something has to come out because he knows that this is critical to the small businesses of India, which is extremely, extremely important for the GST reform.
May I ask you about some of the other crucial demands? And of course, the Congress party's big demand has been the capping of the rate. Now, we understand that the State Finance Minister's panel is not in favor of actually capping the rate as part of the constitutional bill. Was this something that was taken up? And does that continue to be the case? You're not supporting the Congress party's demand?
No, I don't think one can place it in that manner. The idea is, the question was that finance ministers raised the issue in different ways and from their different perspectives, and the consensus was, where the Union Finance Minister was present, was that we have draw up the principles on the basis of which a rate can be fixed, or a range of numbers can be fixed, which is, by the way, not a part of the constitutional amendment that we are talking about today. This will perhaps go into the bill or the act, depending on the nature of the process. And what was the consensus on? The consensus was on two grounds. One, that whatever may be the rate, it must bring down the incidence of tax on the common taxpayer of India, businessman. That's principle one. Otherwise, there's no point of GST. The current effective tax may be for some as high as 32%. So it has to be brought down. That's one. Two, also the rate must protect the revenue of the states so that the states are not disempowered by the GST bill. Yes,
Sure.
the central government, another development which you haven't asked me yet, but let me say, the wording for compensation to the states if there is any loss of revenue left much to be desired because there was
Right.
ambiguity in the wording. You'd be happy to know that unanimously a wording was proposed which is clear that 5 years and that it will be implemented. A very nice constitutional amendment wording was proposed by the empowered committee, which I proposed on the behalf of all the finance ministers. And I believe that much of it will be accepted. So if that is the case, it is important, it's very important that we understand that we have to have a methodology to take this forward. So as far as
Right.
capping
So you're saying
or
that
not
there has
capping,
been agreement. Okay. So no agreement on capping the rate as part of the constitutional amendment
please
bill.
understand,
Perhaps it will be
there is-
part.
you cannot say no agreement. The capping issue
Okay.
was not the issue. Issue was let us formulate a principle. And I
Sure.
must say the Congress ministers were also there. They were well briefed. They made their points. So did all other ministers from other political parties. And a consensus emerged that let us drop the principle. Since this is not a constitutional amendment issued today, it will go
Sure.
tomorrow, it will go to tomorrow or day after. Let us formulate the principle and then leave it to the next step towards arriving at a range or a rate or whatever. So this was in fact acceptable to all concerned.
Let me take that point forward, Dr. Mitra, because we've seen what the Arvind Subramaniam panel has recommended as far as the revenue neutral rate is concerned and the standard rate, sir. At the end of the meeting, you came out to say that there has been consensus broadly as far as the revenue neutral rate goes. Are you in agreement with the suggestions made by the Subramaniam panel, sir? Was that the consensus within the empowered panel?
Pardon me, I did not say that there has been an agreement on the rate. I said there has been an agreement on the principles on the basis of which the rate should be fixed. As far as Dr. Arvind Subramaniam is concerned, he had proposed 15% or 15.5%, and the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy had proposed 18.8%. And then there are those who felt that was too low because then too much of compensation would have to be given by the center. So therefore, we did not go towards a rate, which is what the two contesting parties of Arvind Subramaniam and National Institute of Public Finance and Policy have done. We instead defined the principles on the basis of which in future a range or a rate can be fixed.
What would be an acceptable range or a rate, sir, given the principles that you've just talked about?
I don't think we want to talk about numbers at this stage because this is not going to go now into the constitutional amendment. It appears that there is general agreement across parties that this cannot go into constitutional amendment with a rate. Because nowhere has a tax rate gone into a constitutional amendment. I think there's a general awareness as well as consensus on that. And therefore, now the principles have been laid out in this meeting very successfully. Union Finance Minister was there. He seemed to agree with the kind of principles that have been drawn up. And now it is for him to take this forward in Parliament as well as the political parties, because the finance ministers of all political parties practically elected as finance ministers are all present in the consensus.
Okay, let me then ask you, sir, on one of the other controversial demands raised by the Congress party on doing away with the 1% manufacturing tax or interstate tax. Has there now been an agreement on that issue? Is there an assurance from the government that that will be dropped?
It does appear that the Union Finance Minister is quite flexible on this, because originally this was a proposal which had come from 2-3 finance ministers who have been there in the empowered committee even now. And it appeared that there would be a distortion of taxes by introducing a 1% for producer states and not providing 1% to others. So it is my feeling, which the Union Finance Minister may have expressed in some other words elsewhere, that this is something that may be acceptable to the Union Finance Minister, which he can say the best, but my sense is the distortionary tax is something that I think everybody will come around and agree with.
That's
so therefore,
important,
this
sir.
element of Congress's request appears to be something that is resonating among the finance ministers
across party lines and across state finance ministers. May I also ask you, Dr. Mitra, if there has been any conversation at all on the list of exclusions, items that do not fall under the GST ambit, petroleum, power, and so on and so forth, because a lot of experts do believe that the exclusions are also going to cause distortions. Has there been any conversation today on the exclusions?
Well, I don't think there's an exclusion here of the items you've mentioned, because there was a time when petroleum was to be left out of the GST, but now petroleum has been subsumed, but it will be zero rated now. And in the future, the council, the GST council will decide on what should be done about it. So that is not an exclusion at all. In fact, it is an inclusion, but without the application of the rates. It is zero rated now, which will be a decision taken by the GST Council of all the states, all the finance ministers and all the states and center as well. So it's not an exclusion. Even the entry tax has been subsumed in the GST today. So those which are out of this, there is another kind of tax, which is a higher level of tax, for example, in tobacco or some other products, which is different from all the rest, for which some kind of a rate to be fixed with the state as well as the center. So it is not an exclusion issue. It was at one time, but not anymore.
May I ask you, sir, what is the sense that you get about the political climate and the ability for the government to muster enough numbers to ensure the passage of the bill in this session itself? We were given to understand that the bill would have been taken up in this week, but now we are given to understand that perhaps it could only happen next week. On the back of what you've heard from your peers across other state governments, what you've heard from the centre today, how confident and hopeful do you feel, Dr. Mitra, of the GST bill going through in this session of Parliament?
Look, I don't read horoscopes, and therefore I'm not going to suggest how multivariate process is going to pan out. As you know, in Parliament there's a lot of stress over other issues, a lot of differences, a lot of contentious issues are there. However, as far as the empowered committee of finance ministers with the agenda of GST is concerned, we have done our duty. We have put together consensus on various levels, worked hard on it. Union Finance Minister was there to listen to the empowered committee. So as far as that is concerned, it is something different. But the Parliament's atmospherics and tectonics is something that is in addition to whatever the empowered committee decides, because empowered committee is an independent entity only focused on, at this time, on the GST, not on the overall atmospherics in Parliament, which, as you know, has many contentious processes. People feel aggrieved, etc., etc. So we have to see how the government is going to handle those things, and along with the fact how it will handle the GST issues. We as finance ministers across states have done very hard work in putting together consensus wherever possible and ironing out various issues. So the rest, you will have to ascertain the tectonics and the atmospherics of the Parliament on so many other issues which are rather hot and rather contentious. It will need to be seen how the government of the day will handle those along with the GST.
Well, we will have to see how the parliamentary atmospherics pan out. But Dr. Mitra, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for articulating very clearly for us what transpired at that very crucial meeting today and what the road ahead and the way forward is as far as the goods and services tax is concerned. The chairman of the GST panel and the West Bengal Finance Minister, Amit Mitra there.